Tony Khan's been doing some unhinged tweets. Let's talk about it. So let's rewind to before Tuesday, before Dynamite and NXT aired, to the beginning of Tony's unhinged Twitter rampage. So Tony put out a tweet and promoting Dynamite. He's always promoting Dynamite. You know, you see in an interview, Tony can be asked about anything in the world, like what color is the sky? And he will say, well, what I have to say is we have a great card for Dynamite coming up. So someone tweeted, if Sir Vince McMahon said this, there would be many field AEW fans crying nonstop and furious, #hypocrites. And Tony replied, if Sir Vince McMahon said this, it would be the least of his alleged misdeeds. So I have to ask, has Tony been listening to me? Has Tony been listening to me? Because it was only a few weeks ago that I was going on about how wrestlers have never had the courage to call out Vince McMahon and they're all still really nice to him. Tony's here talking about alleged misdeeds. And that showed me that Tony really, he's able to be the most fearless person in professional wrestling because truly, he appears to be the only person that's not scared of pissing off Vince McMahon and never being able to work in WWE. Because I think that all the wrestlers, even the ones that jumped to AEW, still just have it in them. Like, let's not say anything about Vince in case we need our job back one day. But Tony doesn't have that fear. So he tweeted that. That was funny. I appreciate it. The Vince call out. I like that. Then there was an article from House of Wrestling, shout out Nick Hausman, that said that Triple H and Shawn Michaels are looking to send Tony Khan a message with NXT. Tony retweets this and says, I have a message for them. And then he has a screen grab that says bald asshole, which I'm told is from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Well, I know it's definitely from Curb Your Enthusiasm because I Googled this to make sure that's where it was from. But Tony, all the results for bald asshole now, the first results you see are all Tony Khan rather than Larry David. So he's won the algorithm on that one. Now, I went through his Twitter to get these tweets. And now we're in post-Tuesday. Someone like AI generated a picture of Shawn Michaels winning Booker of the Year from Wrestling Observer. Tony replied to this, actually, I'm pretty sure that last night blew whatever chance he had at winning that award. Then someone tweets, and I don't even know the beginning of this conversation. The difference is that Vince has the power and influence to take them cheap shots. He's earned the right to make them. Tony Khan is Vince if you order him from Temu. You can shop like a billionaire, but you'll get the cheapest tat doing so. Tony replies, yes, Vince has allegedly used his power and influence to shoot a lot of shots. You know, I was still laughing at things at this point, though it then took another turn. When Tony decided to tweet, once we knew that AEW had been beaten by NXT, this week, 2 active, decades-long rating streaks from 2 great legends were ended. With all due respect, until this week's head-to-head AEW and TBS versus WWE on USA, neither John Cena nor The Undertaker had ever been on a WWE show with under 1 million total viewers and under 400K in the demo. Tony. Then, breaking news, because we've just had a tweet from him that was sent to me. He tweeted an hour ago, this weekend marks 1 year since Mayo Clinic saved my mom's life. During her ordeal, many AEW talent came to me alleging WWE tampering, inducing them to break their contracts. I'll never forget these phone calls at her side in the hospital. It's when business became personal for me. He followed it up with, this is nothing new. I mentioned it last year after she came home. It's relevant today because she's checked in for surgery 1 year ago today. As I mentioned several times, Mayo Clinic are heroes, and thanks to them, her recovery from a very grim outlook has been a miracle. He then quote tweeted himself and wrote, "Not that I should be surprised, but the same WWE avatar accounts that spam me every day, no matter what I say or what it's about, are now turning their wrath to mom recovering from a near-death experience. That is why I straight hate these people to the bottom of my heart with all my soul." And then some horrible person tweeted, "You're weak, Tony Khan," and not using the correct version of "you're," just like your mom. And Tony said, "My mom is stronger than you will ever be." Now, should Tony be doing these tweets? I have to say no. Like, a couple were funny. I think the initial ones calling out Vince were funny, and it's cool to take that shot. But I do think when you got to the Undertaker John Cena one, because the ratings had come in, it wasn't a good look. It stopped being funny and it looked more like someone who was really, I don't know, like really going through something. Like, I'm kind of worried about him trying to find ways to get over the fact that, they lost in this ratings war. I think once the ratings came out and AEW lost, the best thing to do was to move on and think of ways that they cannot lose next time, and make the product better and listen to the fans, what they want. And according to Brian Alvarez on Wrestling Observer, the backstage reaction to these tweets haven't been good. Brian said that what he's been hearing is Tony needs to get off his phone and stop tweeting. And he's hearing that from guys in AEW. I think it did get to the point where it did seem a little embarrassing because he was doing this from a weakened position. And just like taking these pot shots at The Undertaker and John Cena, it's not a good look. It's not what AEW should look like. Like, AEW, yes, should look like a company that is challenging WWE, that is delivering better wrestling, a better product than WWE. But it shouldn't look at that like pettiness. It really reminded me of his beef with Ariel Helwani, because when this beef was happening with Ariel Helwani, I thought it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing on both sides, and I would love to see the reaction to like two women getting into it the way that Tony and Ariel did, because if two women did, they would be treated and mocked like they were on Real Housewives. And Tony and Ariel were no better than two Real Housewives with how they got into it. And I thought that it just showed to me that Tony and Ariel were quite similar men. They're two men existing in this world, which is full of big, beefy combat sports guys. Let's call them the jocks. They're two guys existing in this jock world and trying to impress those men. And Ariel really showed himself. Like, he did this tweet where he said something derogatory about Tony that was meant to imply something else. And then he said that his tweet popped the boys in the back. And once Ariel Helwani, a fucking journalist, Ariel Helwani, saying that he popped the boys in the back just showed me everything that I needed to know about him. But I do think Tony is also kind of guilty of getting in these spats and like doing these things to like pop the boys, even if he will say like that's not what he's doing it, but he definitely feels like he has something to prove, from that angle. But I do think all of this just hurts the perception of AEW. A lot of the shots at WWE were fine like before, when AEW was a hotter product, but now because it's not, and they're really coming from an underdog position, it's time to take the high road. I think I can't imagine what some of the wrestlers backstage think of this. Like, in particular, Adam Copeland, who's just jumped from WWE. He had a lengthy career from WWE. It seems that he still has a lot of love for WWE. He's jumped to join this other company, and then immediately his boss is taking these shots at The Undertaker and John Cena. So I would say, Tony, yes, get off Twitter, X, log off and really try and get the shit together that you need to get together so that you can win next time. Look at the booking. Look how people are used. You have collected, as I always say, you have collected the greatest roster of wrestling talent of all time. But they need to be used better. You need to have better ideas of how to use these veterans / legends that you've acquired, and building up young guys. You've added another man at the age of 50 to the roster. Please use him in a way that elevates younger stars, because other than MJF, I don't think a very good job has been done with elevating anyone, no matter how many times a Jericho or a Sting or a Christian or whoever takes a pinfall. There's also a lot of structural shit in the company that Tony still really needs to sort out, in the like behind the scenes admin, office work, all of that situation, all non-wrestling talent, shall we say. I was listening to The Fix with Todd Martin, and he was talking about how Tony hires from a very small pool, like an extremely small pool. And that's true. Like, I can't think of anyone Tony has hired to work for AEW as a non-wrestler. So even people in broadcasting positions, plus all different people working backstage, who isn't either a very close friend of a wrestler, a wife or girlfriend of a wrestler, or family member. He seems to not be able to branch out from that pool. And it just makes me think, whether this is true or not, the perception that I get is that his main concern is hiring a bunch of wrestlers, and all the other stuff, he just wants to be able to fill positions with the closest person to him. If they needed a new travel coordinator, let's say, it would probably end up being a wrestler's sister or brother or girlfriend or someone, rather than him recruiting from outside of that. That's just what I gather from all the like publicly named hires, and any hires that I know about and things that I've seen, is he operates from a very small pool. And I think if he maybe broaden things a bit, stuff might start running a bit smoother. He still has the problem with the women's division. He should put focus on that, because where WWE really does kick AEW's ass is when it comes to women's wrestling. So I think these are the things Tony needs to focus on, rather than the Twitter clapbacks. And I think AEW is at a position where they were once like the darling of the wrestling world, like the hardcore fan base, but I don't think it's as cut and dry now. I think some of the most hardcore people at the beginning are now finding criticism to have, and Tony needs to be answering those criticisms with his product and not doing this Twitter stuff. But yes, she had Vince McMahon all day and never stopped talking about Vince McMahon's alleged misdeeds. My final thing on this is another thing that doesn't help these Tony tweets, the perception, everything, is the MJF stuff that happened on Dynamite, the controversial MJF angle where Juice Robinson presented a roll of quarters with Friedman written on them. And MJF appears he wants to do a story about anti-Semitism, and a lot of people were really not happy with this being on Dynamite, especially with what has just happened in the world. And it doesn't help things when Tony's out there replying to fools on Twitter about all this rating stuff and WWE stuff, and he's not publicly addressed the complaints and the concerns and the very, very legitimate criticism that so many people have had about this angle that we saw on Dynamite. Now, apparently he's addressed it with someone in the DMs, which I don't have that story verified, so I'm not going to go into it, but that kind of does sound like Tony. He likes to DM slide, but this criticism that they've faced, it really does feel like something Tony should be addressing. On my bonus episode, on my review, I gave all my thoughts about the MJF Juice Robinson angle. I'll just say here that I do think that they should cancel it. I don't think it's appropriate. And if you want to know why, I would just say, like, listen to that podcast episode, because I tried to go to it in depth as much as I can. And I'm not Jewish, and I've listened to and read what Jewish fans and writers have been saying about it, and other people as well. And I think that it's something that I would scrap if I was AEW. I do think that a lot of it comes back to, like, we need more people in the room in AEW. You know, I asked Tony Khan, were there any women in the room? And you could boil his answer down to him saying basically no. And I do feel that because Tony is so, like, I have the final say, everything goes through me. I do wonder who was in the room for this when this angle was being conceived, because I would guess that it was MJF, Juice Robinson, and Jay White and Tony Khan. And I think even though Tony uses like Jericho and Danielson and Moxley for ideas and stuff, I don't think everyone's ever all in the room at once. So I just wonder how many opinions Tony got on this, which is a very serious angle. How many opinions did he get before okaying it? I do wonder.